Welcome to the alchemy of sex and spirit, where sex, psychology and spirit meet. In this episode, I'll introduce Karezza, and stay until the end for today's magical practice. It might just change everything. Picture a blacksmith's forge, the kind you would have found once upon a time at the edge of a rural village. Thick stone walls, a low roof, a single fire burning in the centre of space. The blacksmith's working without hurry. He isn't stirring the fire constantly. Instead, he banks the fire carefully and controls the air. He uses the bellows sparingly. Most of the time, he simply rests the iron in the heat, and that's what allows it to soften. The fire that softens iron isn't made powerful by constant movement, it's made powerful by containment. If the fire was disturbed too often, the heat would escape. If the iron was constantly moved in and out, it wouldn't change. The skill's not in doing more, but knowing when to stop interfering. Too much movement, too much stirring, forcing, and the heat would escape. The metal won't soften. But when the fire is held, when the space is protected, something extraordinary happens. Solid iron softens without breaking. Containment builds heat. Stillness makes transformation possible. The blacksmith understands energy must be held, not spent, if it's to do its real work. Karezza applies this same principle to intimacy. When movement stops and presence remains, energy gathers rather than dissipates. Something deeper takes place. The word Karezza comes from the Italian word for caress, and it describes a way of making love that steps off the treadmill of chasing orgasm. When release is no longer the destination, something unexpected happens. Intimacy deepens, sensation spreads, and connection becomes more important than climax. What's essential to understand is that Karezza isn't simply about lovemaking without ejaculation, it's equally about the absence of movement. In Karezza, couples don't do sex, they become present within it. Karezza isn't a modern sexual technique or a spiritual trend, it's an older understanding of intimacy that proves what happens when sexual energy is no longer spent but contained. That's the territory Karezza invites us to explore. Karezza begins precisely here as an embodied training in how energy is held, invested, and shared. Without thrusting, without performance, both bodies are invited to contain sensation rather than spend it. This lack of movement isn't passive, it requires discipline. It allows arousal, tenderness, and emotional presence to build organically without tipping into discharge. In this way, Karezza isn't about holding back energy, but about remaining fully present inside, where energy gathers and deepens on its own. It's not about suppressing desire or denying pleasure. It's about changing the aim of sex itself. Instead of building tension towards release, arousal is allowed to circulate. Instead of friction and orgasm being the goal, connection becomes primary. Sex energy, when not discharged, feeds the nervous system rather than overstimulating it. intimacy becomes nourishing rather than depleting. Karezza begins the moment effort stops and you remain. From this perspective, male orgasm isn't forbidden, but it's no longer expected, demanded, or even required. If you find yourself trying to do Karezza, holding, managing, controlling, or striving, then you've already left it. But let me make one thing clear. In Karezza, the man doesn't ejaculate. That's not said as a rule or a moral position, but as a practical foundation. In Karezza, sex energy isn't discharged, it's contained. Sensation, arousal, pleasure, and presence are found within that containment. Nothing's rushed towards release, nothing's lost. This changes everything. When ejaculation is removed from the center of sex, urgency drops away. Touch becomes more sensitive. Connection becomes more important than outcome. The magic happens in stillness, where presence replaces performance and energy develops heat naturally because it's no longer being pushed anywhere. For the man, this means mastery rather than performance. For the couple, it means deepening rather than collapsing. One of the biggest misunderstandings about Karezza is that it's sexually repressive, that it's about holding back or denying pleasure. It isn't about moral rules or prescribing a better way to have sex. Karezza isn't semen retention with better manners. In fact, it's the opposite. Karezza isn't about stopping pleasure. It's about letting pleasure spread. It's about discovering how much pleasure, presence, and connection are possible when energy is held rather than spent. By slowing down and removing the demand to finish, the nervous system begins to relax. Arousal becomes more diffuse. Touch becomes more meaningful, and intimacy deepens in a way that fast, goal-driven sex rarely allows. Karezza invites us to stay present with sensation rather than rushing towards release. And speaking of release, there's a clear distinction between two types of orgasm. The first is what most of us are familiar with, a brief, explosive release. Energy builds, discharges, and then drops away, a momentary sensation, followed by a kind of collapse. The second is something quite different. Instead of discharging energy, this kind of orgasm circulates it. Arousal doesn't spike and disappear. It continues, spreads, and integrates throughout the entire body. Rather than ending intimacy, it deepens it. From this perspective, orgasm isn't a climax. It's something that can happen within connection without breaking it. One kind of orgasm empties the system, the other feeds it. And this difference has profound implications. For men, it presents a challenge. For women, a welcome intervention. Karezza presents a real challenge to the stereotypical masculine sexual model. Most men have been conditioned towards urgency, towards performance, conquest, and release. Finishing becomes proof of success. Karezza turns that logic on its head. In Karezza, ejaculation control isn't about suppression or discipline, it's an act of service. The masculine role becomes one of pacing, steadiness, and emotional containment, not driving the experience forward, but containing it. In this sense, Karezza asks something quite heroic of men. Not conquest, not intensity, but reliability. In Karezza, the man doesn't prove himself by finishing, he proves himself by staying. And when that happens, something very important becomes possible for women. When there's no pressure to perform, no demand to climax, no fear of being rushed, her nervous system begins to soften. Female arousal is often gradual, responsive, and deeply influenced by the expectations or even demands of her partner. Karezza allows pleasure to unfold rather than be demanded. Trust deepens. Surrender becomes possible. Desire has time to find its own rhythm. When there's no urgency to complete, the body opens in its own time. And as intimacy slows down in this way, something therapeutic begins to happen. From a therapeutic point of view, Karezza provides a link between sex and consciousness, between erotic energy and emotional safety. It can be a way of regulating arousal, healing intimacy wounds, and retraining the body away from past trauma and even addictions. Slow, sustained intimacy will often bring past trauma to the surface. Anxiety, avoidance, impatience, fear of closeness, all may resurface, but they're revealed gently. Karezza doesn't override or bypass these patterns. It allows them to show themselves safely, relationally, and without overwhelm. It often reveals more about our emotional world than years of talk therapy alone. Karezza doesn't hide anything. It reveals it slowly, kindly, and truthfully. In this way, Karezza can support psychological and nervous system healing, which is why this practice feels so radical and so necessary today. Karezza offers an antidote to sexual burnout and performance anxiety. We live in a culture of speed, stimulation, and performance. Pornography, sexual expectations, and pressure have made it very difficult to relax into intimacy. It's important to say that Karezza isn't meant to replace all sex. It's not a rule, it's an option, a way of restoring balance and remembering that intimacy can be nourishing rather than draining. Karezza invites curiosity. It asks us to explore what happens when we slow down, stay present, and allow connection to matter more than completion. Karezza reminds us that the deepest sexual satisfaction doesn't come from finishing, but from staying. Magical practice. Find a quiet place where you won't be disturbed or interrupted. Sit or lie comfortably. Once you've chosen a comfortable position, don't alter it. Let the body settle. This practice begins when movement stops. You're not here to stimulate, improve, or achieve anything. You're here to simply be. Allow your eyes to close. Take a slow breath in through the nose and exhale gently again through the nose. Again, inhale Feel the belly expand. Soften the belly as you exhale. Feel it sink back. Keep this breathing pattern for a few more breaths. And now allow your attention to drop down into the body, out of the head, out of thought, and into your body. Now imagine that you're standing at ground level on firm, solid earth. Your feet are supported, your weight is held. There's nowhere to go, no urgency, no goal. Ahead of you is a simple path. This path leads inward and slightly downward, away from noise and effort, towards somewhere quieter, kinder, and more intimate. In your imagination, you begin to walk. With each step, the outer world fades. You're not leaving life, you're entering it more deeply. And as you continue, the quality of your awareness changes. Thought loses its importance. The path opens into a quiet, inner space. This space feels fluid rather than solid, soft rather than hard. There's a faint silvery light here. Not bright, but luminous. You become aware that your attention has arrived and settled in a deep place in the center of the body, below the solar plexus, around the area of your pelvis, where feeling, creativity, and sexuality arise. There's nothing to do here, nothing to fix, nothing to perform. Simply rest your attention in this center. Notice any sensations, warmth, vibration, or perhaps simply stillness. Allow your breath to flow easily into this area. This is the place where desire is born. Not compulsive desire, but the impulse towards connection, pleasure, and life itself. Let the energy here be exactly as it is. You're not trying to excite it, and you're not needing to suppress it. You're simply experiencing it. If thoughts arise, let them pass, just like ripples on water. Return again and again to this deep, quiet place. A deep bodily wisdom is here that doesn't speak in words. Remain here for a few more breaths, long enough to recognize this energy doesn't need to be discharged to be alive. It doesn't need to be pushed towards an outcome to be meaningful. It can simply be felt. Gently now begin to sense the whole body again. The support beneath you, the rhythm of your breathing. And when you're ready, allow the image to fade. And when it feels right, open your eyes. This is where Karezza begins. Not in movement, not in effort, not in release, but in the capacity to remain present with feeling without needing to do anything with it. When this quality is brought into intimacy, touch slows, attention deepens, and sensation becomes something to experience rather than chase. Carry this quality with you into your body, into your breath, and when the time is right, into closeness with another. I hope you've enjoyed this episode and that you've found it helpful. Until next time, take these words away with you. Karezza produces the ability to stay with sensation without needing it to go anywhere or for you to do anything with it. Thank you for listening. I'm David Brown, and this is The Alchemy of Sex and Spirit.